Hello everyone and welcome back to the Big Bros podcast. My name is Jeremy and welcome if it's your first time joining us on the show. I'm joined by my lovely friend and co-host Ilan. How you going, mate?
I'm pretty good, bro. How are you?
I'm good, mate. Today we're talking all things controlling in a relationship. What are the signs of a controlling partner? It's not healthy. We know that, but we know that it can often get mistaken for boundary setting, for protection, for love, even so. So what are the signs of a controlling partner? And we will dive into this, but we'll also define what the differences are. You know, what is controlling? What is protection? What are boundaries? So you guys know what to look out for.
Yeah, it's a really sensitive topic, and I think it's one that needs to be approached with a sense of gentleness, because you might find yourself in a relationship, and especially if it's your first relationship, you might be like, wow, I got to enforce a boundary. Oh, I'm not comfortable if my partner does this, but I don't want to come off as controlling. So trying to figure out what healthy behavior is acceptable can definitely be a challenge. But I reckon let's define our terms. So if I was to set a boundary with you, Jeremy, the boundary isn't to control you. It's just to tell you what I'm comfortable with putting up with in the bounds of a relationship.
And what you expect, how you expect to be treated in the relationship.
Correct. And if that boundary is breached, my response to that can be twofold. I can either put up with it or I can leave. But it's not to control what you can or cannot do. If I'm choosing to control you, it's as per the definition. Not only am I telling you what I'm willing to tolerate and not willing to tolerate, I'm also telling you what to do and versus what not to do.
It's a sense of power almost, isn't it?
It definitely can be. And the thing is, when it comes to control, it can sometimes disguise itself, as you said, under the guise of being protective.
Yeah.
Because when you feel protected, you feel like the other person loves you. And sometimes it's a bit of a murky water to navigate. How do I know which one is which? And I'm a massive believer that if you're with someone who is showing controlling tendencies, control and being a controlling partner tends to be a symptom of insecurity in that person. Because
absolutely.
If I'm really, really insecure as a partner, I'm almost trying to dictate what you can and can't do as a means of making sure that my sense of self isn't threatened or compromised.
Or fearful of being left or having your ego hit, because you never see controlling partners within secure relationships. You never see someone who is secure have controlling tendencies. These are the relationships that tend to flourish, where you see people being able to say, yes, baby, you go and enjoy your night and have fun with your mates and check in due course whenever you've got a minute. You know, go enjoy yourself, versus the contrary, where the guy typically might say, who are you with? What are you doing? Where are you now? Where are you going next? Send me a photo. Give me an update every so often. And they're very demanding about what they ask for their partner and how they ask about it. It's very normal to say, let me know what you're doing tonight and let me know who you're hanging out with. But it's not normal to ask and almost irritate them every so often and then almost ask for proof. That's where it comes into it. If they're asking for proof about who they are hanging out with and to send photos of it perhaps, or to send their live location. And that can often be misconstrued to think, I'm just looking out for you. I just want you to be safe. But you also have to remember that your partner is a grown adult just as like you are as well. So they can look after themselves. They can fend for themselves, especially if they are with other people. They will be safe. But once you take that side of asking for photo proof, asking for location updates constantly, and even maybe oftentimes you can see where the partner might even text the person's mates, text their partner's mates and ask, are you with them, blah, blah, blah. That's just taking a whole nother lens and a whole nother level of control to this topic, where the writing's on the wall that you are in a controlling relationship.
Correct. And control doesn't, first of all, I will say you can't actually control what someone chooses to do or what not to do. It might seem temporarily effective, but if I'm trying to control you over time, you're going to rebel and you're going to say, get fucked. I'd rather not be in your prison. I'd rather do what I want. And that might manifest into something worse, for you at least. If you're with someone who also consistently criticizes you or has a emotional outburst by the smallest of things as well, that's usually a good sign as well, because someone who's quite secure in themselves, they don't necessarily get shitty at the smaller things. They tend to
brush it off. Think what's the big deal here?
But the person who tries to control their partner, it's almost like they're itching for something to get angry at. It's like a confirmation bias in their head. They're trying to select something that can give them some sort of justification to call out their partner for some sort of behavior. And in a lot of ways, it's a way to kind of assert this dominance, this sort of power over them, to say, well, you're not up to this scratch, you need to be a better partner. It's almost like that partner needs to always be looking to improve themselves, and it's this unrelenting standard as well. Like they're being marked against this idealization or this fantasy by the controlling partner that may or may not even exist. And that's exhausting as hell.
Yeah, and it's getting them to try to reach a standard, not for the betterment of them as a person, but for the betterment of almost like a respect and an idealization towards their partner in the relationship. Like, you must do better here because that's what I demand for myself. And it's again, it comes back down to that sense of power, that sense of trying to one up your partner, trying to be a little bit competitive with them versus trying to actually just be a team together, which it obviously should be.
For sure. And I think that's what's really lost in this kind of discussion, is because the person who's protective over you doesn't feel like they need to one up you. They're protective over you because they want you to be safe. But think about it this way. Ask yourself, which people in your life, maybe it's your parents who genuinely care about your safety, are they blowing up your phone every second telling you who you can and shouldn't hang out with? Or do they respect your independence? Do you feel like you're in a prison with those people that care about you? I mean, your friends might care about you, but are they constantly criticizing you? So it's always good to be mindful, because if you might end up in an argument with your partner where you're like, well, why are you always telling me where I can and can't go? They might use a cop-out response like, well, I care about your safety. It's like, yeah, but all these other people care about my safety too, but they're not making me feel as though I'm trapped in a prison cell. And, you know, it's like almost like you're having to report to a parole officer consistently, and that's not love. And another thing as well is, like, if you're in a relationship with someone and they're not giving you time or space or respecting the fact that you want to just have alone time, even though you might not be doing anything other than just chilling, kicking back, doom scrolling, and they don't want you to do that because they feel like by you being alone, that's somehow compromising the sanctity of the relationship because you don't want to spend it with them. That's also not a good sign. But generally speaking, I'm confident that most people have an idea whether their partner is controlling or not, because it usually stems from insecurity. But it also usually stems from the first initial dates, I would say. It's very hard to put on a mask and put on a charade for the first month, let's say, of dating, which would typically involve initiating going out or initiating that person being around different environments and not necessarily always being around you. So I think sense of control in a partner, and to the point of it being toxic, is a downward slope. It's a snowball effect which happens throughout a relationship, which typically starts off that way. I think if you enter dating with someone, you can very soon see from the get-go whether they have tendencies to be that way or whether they're very much calm, free-flowing, respective of your boundaries. It all comes back down to communication, doesn't it? With most things in dating, but very much can this topic be avoided with those initial conversations about what do you expect when I'm on nights out? What do you expect when I'm hanging out and I'm with people and perhaps my phone is off, or perhaps, phones are barely off these days, but perhaps I haven't responded for a while. Perhaps I've got poor internet connection, whatever it might be. How do you expect, or how would you act in these situations? And this is where boundary setting comes into it. And if you set those boundaries early on in dating this person, or early on when these things start to arise, even if you are serious about each other now and you're not just dating, but you might even be in the relationship with them, if you have these conversations early, you will offload the potential for this to unfold in a negative light, in a light that goes down the route of being toxic and protective based and control based. You will avoid all of that if you have these conversations early, because
If you have them early and the person says, oh, I'd be very calm, but then they don't actually respond that way, well, you've got all right to call them out, and you've got all right to have a leg to stand on and say, hey, you promised me this, you're not acting this way. What is that about?
Correct. And I think having an open dialogue can always be useful about these things. My hunch, though, is you don't really find out until you're in the relationship. So you and I could have the best discussion about what our boundaries are, what we're willing to tolerate. But until there's a stressful stimulus that tests that potential boundary, we won't find out. Because you know what? There's so many cases, I call them grey scenarios. So let's say I'm in a relationship with someone, or you're in a relationship with someone, and your partner has a opposite sex best friend, like a bestie, right? And for some people, they might not give a shit. For others, they might care. Perhaps they were in a relationship, their ex had the exact same scenario, and perhaps it ended it in the worst way, in that they got cheated on with the best friend. And it happens. How do you navigate that conversation, right? You say, look, this is what happened in the past. This is why I might potentially fear a similar outcome. This is not me telling you not to be friends with them, but this is just for you to understand. Now, I think there's an onus of responsibility on you as well, because you're dating someone knowing that they have a boy best friend or a girl best friend. You should understand what their values are versus what your values are, because they might not actually look at that as a thing that may compromise the relationship, whereas you might. Having a boundary in that case doesn't necessarily mean that you tell them not to hang out with that person. It might simply say, look, we're early into dating and I don't want to jeopardize the friendship that you have with this person. Clearly it means a lot to you, but I know I might be really, really uncomfortable if this was to progress, because I don't want to break up your friendship, right? I think it'd be unfair. It's up to you then to choose whether to stay or leave. Because if you want to be in a relationship with this person, they're not going to actually listen to what you say, in the sense of you can't control what they do. So it's up to you to either leave, or if you're going to stay, you almost have to put up with it, right? But you can't control them. Conversely though, they might be like, you know what? I can see why this would be uncomfortable for you. It might be worth drifting from that boy best friend, or it might not be. But you have to get clear on what you're willing to tolerate versus not. And if it's something that isn't going to be respected, then you have to be strong enough to leave.
Yeah, it's a big topic, the boy best friend for the girl, or vice versa, the guy best friend of the girl that you're dating. And I've always believed, and I've always said that you have no right to tell your partner that they cannot be friends with someone anymore when they were friends with that person already long before they met you. That's always been my belief, and I think that's the fairest thing that you can say. But with that being said, there are certain things that are appropriate and are not appropriate when you are now in a relationship with them. If it's the example where you're dating a girl and she's got a guy best friend and they've been best friends for years, and they would always be hanging out at nights and going on late night drives together and things like that. If they truly are really good friends, they would be mature and they would have the understanding that that would probably not be responsible and appropriate to do anymore when one of them are in a relationship. Why? Because it's not the time, it's not the place to be hanging out late at night, going on drives, very intimate setting, and it's typically more of a romantic setting versus hanging out during the day perhaps. And if there are excuses that come with that, like, well, we just don't have time during the day and late nights are the only time we can do that, I call bullshit on that. I think if you truly are friends with someone and you respect your partner as well, you will make it work because you want to make it work.
What do you value
find
more?
A way.
What do you value more? I'm sorry to cut you off, but this is a really, really important point. What do you value more? This friendship or potentially a partnership? Because look, everyone's different, but I would put a pun out that most people would value their intimate relationship more than a particular friendship. And that's not to undermine the friendship they have, but it's just to say the person you pick and the person you choose to potentially marry one day or have kids with, that's a big monumental life decision.
Well, I think it's more so just a respect thing, I think.
But it's correct. So if it's a big decision, you want to respect the sanctity of that relationship and not undermine it. So I don't believe that if someone says to you and you're in a relationship with them, I'm actually not comfortable with you going on late night drives with your boy best friend, I don't believe that's necessarily a controlling habit. If they
No,
say you're not
that's-
going to,
yeah.
that's a different story. That's controlling.
Exactly.
Because the person who's controlling in the relationship, they're never the ones to actually depart from the relationship. They actually rely on it, right? But the person who's secure in themselves says, look, I'm not comfortable with this. If this is something you want to do, free will, but I'm off. I'm out of here.
Or just know that, yes, you know that I have told you that I'm not comfortable with this. I would hope that you would respect that if you do give a shit about me in any way.
Correct. And I think it's also an issue if we start labeling everything as controlling, like with any other thing, it ends up trivializing the original definition of it, right? Because if I'm labeling everything that my partner says as controlling, it gets to a point where they start feeling uncomfortable to bring up things that legitimately concern them about the relationship, because they are fearful that all I'm going to do is just call them controlling.
Yeah.
And then issues get swept under the rug, resentment builds, and a big fight happens later down the line.
Yeah, everything is with balance. Like you can't go to one end of the spectrum where you start to say everything makes you feel uncomfortable, because that's just unrealistic. And then that actually just shows to your partner, well, I'm maybe dating an insecure person here. If they're saying everything is giving them discomfort, that's not what we're saying here. But we're saying in those circumstances where it clearly on the face of it looks like there could be alternative things that you could do to make your partner feel comfortable and for you to respect what they're saying, that is where we are saying that having a conversation about saying what makes you feel uncomfortable is appropriate. Not everything will make you feel uncomfortable, and telling your partner that everything makes them uncomfortable is just gaslighting, and it's just making you look very insecure. So it comes within reason, it comes within caution. It's just about being logical about this, because too much of it will actually just make you look completely insecure yourself, and no one wants to be with someone like that.
I completely agree. And I think I have no issues with setting boundaries, but I don't think you should set a boundary for everything that makes you potentially uncomfortable. Because if you're in a relationship with someone and you are uncomfortable by the fact that they'd rather have 2 hours of alone time on a Sunday night before they start work the next day rather than spend it with you, and that makes you uncomfortable, that doesn't mean you have to set a boundary that says every Sunday night I would love for us to hang out. Because
good point.
The thing is, there's going to be so many things and so many times in our life where we become uncomfortable by things. That doesn't mean we need to try and use a boundary to control it. It's about picking your battles. It's about seeing what's actually fundamental to you. Because in that situation, it's worth asking yourself, why do I need to feel like I need to see my partner every second of the day? Why can't I give them alone time? What does that potentially say about me, right? Because you might have to tolerate that discomfort for the longevity of the relationship. But it's picking your battles, because there might be another situation where they do something that might be legitimately compromising the relationship, right? They might be talking to an old ex that they had, but they tell you, well, I don't want to block them or I don't want to stop messaging them because that's mean. That's a different scenario. So you pick your battles, and you pick the battles that are worth fighting for. And believe it or not, I don't really have to tell you. You don't have to tell our audience what those battles are that are worth picking. You tend to know. But just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean it necessarily always has to be avoided.
Yeah, it doesn't always have to be avoided. You're right, because the beauty of a good relationship is the ability to communicate your way through what life throws at you, and not make everything so formal, not make everything so serious, not make everything so, God, my decision depends on this, or what we do depends on this decision. A lot of it is, well, the best relationships are the calm ones, in my opinion. It's the ones where you can be calm. Yes, you might navigate something that makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable perhaps, but you talk it out. It doesn't need to be a boundary all the time. I feel like the boundaries are there to act as like your pillars. You know, what are the pillars of the relationship? What are the tree trunks that will hold you guys together, that you can come back to and say, this is our boundary where we're not crossing this? But a boundary doesn't need to be every single branch off of that pillar. It doesn't need to be every leaf off of those branches, if that makes sense as an analogy, because this is where and this is more so a topic about, I think, self-improvement and betterment, but this is where the dangers of self-improvement can lie, because people might think, okay, well, to make something more optimal, I need to set a boundary here. I need to set a boundary for everything. I need to have my non-negotiables for every single thing. I need to be actually thinking about too much and everything in entirely. And that's where those types of people need to just relax, realize that, okay, not everything is that important. Not everything needs to be that official. Just strip it back down to your fundamentals. What are the fundamentals? What are the tree trunks? And everything else that happens in life, you will work that out, and you should have confidence in yourself and in your relationship that you guys will work things out as they come to be. You don't need to sit down and have a serious conversation about boundary setting and about non-negotiables for every single thing that comes up. That's where the dangers lie with self-improvement, and I think it's just an important point for us to raise here.
And I reckon you're right. If you're trying to use that logic to apply to every single aspect of the relationship, I'd hazard a guess that that's coming from a place of insecurity, because most secure people will tend to use that logic and the boundaries for the big pillar things of the relationship. Going back to my earlier point though about sometimes you just have to tolerate discomfort. Perhaps you're in a relationship with someone in their 20s and they want to go away with their friends to Europe for a holiday, or they just want to go traveling in general. You might be uncomfortable by the fact that you're going to be, stuck at home. You're going to work, you're not having these exciting moments, but your partner is, and they're potentially away from you and you're going to miss them. That's going to make you uncomfortable. Does that necessarily mean that you're going to put a boundary in place and say, hey, you're not going to travel because it makes me uncomfortable? No, you would probably say, especially if you're in a secure relationship, have the best time, don't do anything I wouldn't do, love you, send me some photos, and hopefully we go on a holiday soon together.
And
right?
hopefully, yeah, and then just scheduling those times to catch up and to speak as well.
Correct, because I think the main thing here is that you will know if you are in a controlling relationship based on the fact if you feel like you're walking on eggshells, feel like you're always getting criticized for the smallest of things, feeling as though you can't do anything without the permission of your partner. And the thing is, the best relationships are the ones where you can continue being yourself. And if you're not able to be yourself, chances are you'll find out the hard way that you're not in the right relationship for you.
Yeah, I think another good litmus test is when you're on those nights out, you might be with mates and your partner's not there. Are you fearful to look at your phone? Are you fearful to see what notifications come up on your phone? Or are you very comfortable with just letting your phone sit there and not worrying about, am I going to get a certain text message asking me about where I am or what I'm doing, or a photo about who I'm with? Because those relationships exist, and I would hate to feel like, I would hate to be in the position of being in one of those relationships, because that's when, like you said, it's a feeling. It's a feeling when you're in a controlling situation like that. And I think that's a good litmus test to know if you're very fearful about your phone use and about what you're doing in that moment in the night as well. If you're very much able to just sit there calmly, enjoy with your friends, and just, check in here and there with your partner, completely fine. If you're on the other end though, and you're not checking in at all, then that's where you're putting your partner in an uncomfortable position as well. So again, it's finding that balance about not being on either end of the spectrum. It's just about going with the calmness of the moment. And if you just trust your partner, if you just trust that you guys know that you can work things out when they come to be, and when something arises and you can talk through it calmly, those are the best relationships. If you know deep down that you can't do that, well, you might need to second guess the situation that you're currently in.
Correct. And I think just one thing to heavily emphasize before we end this episode is that boundaries are excellent, but they're not going to ever be a means to control what your partner can or can't do. It's all about what you're willing to tolerate. And if you're questioning whether your partner is truly controlling you, you have to ask, is it a symptom of something else? Because you tend to have a gut instinct. You tend to know if they are. And usually you'll be able to know. On that note, guys, we hope you have a lovely rest of your week. Give us a 5-star rating. It helps more than you know. And we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.